19th of October 2022. You're very welcome back on more about EVs, electric vehicles, to buy or not to buy. That is the question. I would be thinking in lines of a nurse that might want her car, or a Garda, or somebody who's in a fire brigade or that needs to get to work. And remember, in a lot of cases where people get up to go to work in the morning or go in the evening, they are replacing somebody, and if they don't arrive on time, that person will not get away. That person could have children to collect or could have other things to do and may have to be back in again later that day. We're not talking about the fella or the girl or the rich person who goes for a lovely drive out the road 15 miles and looks at the beach and comes home again and says electric cars are fantastic. We're talking about people who need transport for work, for leisure, or for whatever they need to get around. I couldn't do without the motor to get me around and get things done and go and get messages and all that sort of stuff, and most people can't. So please, people, will you get it to understand? We're not talking here about leisure use, or even maybe an old person has one to go about town and go in and get the messages and just charge it for a while at home and do 15 miles a week. That's not what we're talking about. We're talking here about a car which is used for work. Now, since I started campaigning against the green agenda, I'm unapologetically against the fake green agenda that's in the world, and I've been proven right. Look at the price of your ESB bill. Look what's going happening in Germany, where they have a whole lot of windmills, and it's no good. Now, online there are a lot of internet channels and anonymous internet channels, and I just post on them for a bit of crack. But I got a lot of abuse over the years, and one was some guy who was on politics.ie. He was Hollandia. He works for Irish Water. He lives in Dublin, and he is very abusive and determined to see this green agenda pushed through. In fact, he set up his own website as well, Irish Politics Online. I think it died out. And even on that same channel, there was a guy who gave dogs abuse, and he was given so much abuse that I investigated him and found out who he was. He was a Dublin fella from Ballyfermot who has moved to Finland, and very abusive and totally anti-country and anti my stance on renewable energy and on electric cars. And there was another guy who's from Leixlip, and he lives down in Carlow, down there, Kildare, Carlow area. But it transpires that neither of them drive a car at all. Neither of them can drive a car. They cannot drive a car. So they will never ever have to be stuck when their electric car can't be charged. So you have to go back to who are we talking about? We're talking about those who need the electric car. And my cousin's wife has told me her experiences with a Nissan Leaf, and everyone says that's nonsense. Now, don't forget, the Nissan Leaf was one of the first electric cars out. Not the first, but it was almost the first. So it's only now the problems are coming to light with it. It's not just the battery, it's the way they're put together. Nobody ever told anyone that they can't they can't put a tow bar on them. And a Nissan Leaf cannot be towed. If you tow it 3 yards, you'll destroy it forever. Cavan County Council bought one. I don't know what make it was. It happened the same. They towed it when it stopped on the road, and it never went again. Now, I want to read you an article here that I've just seen, and I'm going to read a few. There's plenty of articles online to try and convince people. What I am convinced of, this is out of a newspaper, that a lot of people are going to suffer grievous harm. A lot of very decent people. If I ever get sick and I go into a hospital and the nurses are there to attend to me, I'd like them to be happy to have a decent car outside to get home and get back. I don't want them having anxiety and telling me I bought a load of junk and I can't get rid of it. And the commentators here, Jim Murphy and others, say they're making great money. But they're not, people haven't coppered onto them. Why are they selling them 2-year-olds? Why are they selling them 3-year-olds? I've told you one was sold because it simply wouldn't go to Limerick and back. But in the case of the Nissan, which the garages are saying are 100%, this is the article. And the picture of the Nissan is here charging. It's a white one. It's a Nissan Leaf. There it's there. I have no issue with Nissan as far as I'm concerned. The only thing wrong with Nissan, different to the rest, is that it doesn't have a cooling system for the battery. Most of them don't have that, but they're all the same, including the Teslas. There's none of these any better. So what the heading says here is electric nightmare, EV owner details 15-hour track to travel 178 miles. An electric vehicle owner who takes road trips between Cheyenne and Casper in Wyoming. There was 2 towns in Wyoming. I was in Wyoming. There's more grass on an acre of my land than there is on the whole state. It's just burnt out of it. That's the way it is. So he travels between Casper and Cheyenne in Wyoming and has revealed that his first trip of 178 miles took a staggering 15 hours to complete in his Nissan Leaf. 178 miles. It took 15 hours to complete. It was very difficult. For example, it took 15 hours to get from Cheyenne to Casper. Alan O'Hashi. And he has the Irish type of O with the comma the comma after it. Alan O'Hashi. H-I-S-H-I. But the O would tend to make me think he's an Irishman. But the O'Hashi, definitely no O'Hashis anywhere in Ireland. I'd say there was a bit of a crossbreeding going on there. But anyway, he told the Cowboy State Daily, that's the Cowboy State Daily, that's a newspaper, adding that his particular trip wasn't taken in the beginning of the EV era. It was May 2022. So what he's saying, this didn't happen 4 years ago when the whole things were novel. This was last May 2022. That's the point he's making. 1 month later, O'Hashi was able to complete the road trip in about 11 hours, he said. To put it into perspective, the trip of 178 miles should take less than 2.5 hours travelling at a speed in the speed limit of with a gasoline-powered vehicle. O'Hashi's experience driving across Wyoming has been such an adventure that the EV owner even wrote a book about the subject. On the Trail, Electric Vehicle Advice and Anxiety. And they tell me there's none of this. Charging an EV involves 3 different levels of chargers that power up different types of EVs at different rates, Cowboy State Daily noted. But none of these charging levels are as fast as filling up with a gas-powered car or pump. You go into the filling station, you stick the hose in it, you whiz away, you go in and pay, and away you go. It doesn't matter if there's 40 ahead of you. If in normal circumstances, you'll get away in no time. O'Hashi said that on his first trip to Cody, I was in Cody, Buffalo Bill had a hotel there, and I was in that town, Wyoming, from Colorado in his Nissan Leaf. He used the level 3 charger at a public charging station in Wellington, Colorado, which can take his small vehicle between 10 and 30 minutes to charge. So he went for the fairly fast charger. I don't fully understand all that. But the charge wasn't enough to get him to Casper, Wyoming. So he had to drive 30 miles to Cheyenne, where he could use a level 2 charger at a Nissan dealership. So you'd need to have a university degree in the level 1 and level 2s and all of that. Whereas with the petrol and diesel, you simply know the difference between petrol and diesel and off you go. Or gas in America and diesel. At that level, O'Hashi would get roughly 10 miles worth of power for every hour he hooked up. Read that again. He would get 10 miles worth of power for every hour he hooked up to the mains. Moreover, O'Hashi had to charge for 3 hours in order to get his battery back to where it was when he left Wellington. So this is the point. If you're prepared to hang around, well then. And what are you going to do? Hanging around. There's nothing as miserable as hanging around a place. What I've learned from driving this thing is patience, patience, patience. Well, sure, you can walk or buy a horse and cart if patience is the thing. If I'm working on the farm and I want to go in to buy something urgently to get the job finished, you need to be able to get in and go. That's what we're used to. Now, so another problem with EVs in a place like Wyoming is that hilly terrain, wind speeds, wind speeds need to be factored in. So who's going to have time to be factoring in the hills and the terrain? As it can degrade an EU's range by up to half, the report stated. So there you are. If you're going up hills and doing all that, you'll degrade the thing. You'll only get half out of the battery. Additionally, an EV owner cannot just call the AAA to bring them more electricity. You can't put electricity in a bag. And this is a thing that 95% of Irish people believe, that electricity can be put into a bag like they're shopping. That's how stupid they are. They talk about it in a quantitative way about how many houses a particular power station or wind farm will provide power for, as if it could be stored in a box or a bag. Additionally, now he said an electric vehicle that has run out of power needs to be towed to a charging station. Well, I'd like to hear anyone that knows it. I can tell you definitely a Nissan Leaf cannot be towed. If you're towed, it'll never go again. And here's this fella talking about towing it. So are there some of these that actually can be towed? I'm not sure. It would seem to me that if you had some type of a special gear, you could. But I understand from everyone that has them, none of them can be towed. It's on the instructions. If you break down on the road, you have to get it lifted onto the lorry. And in fact, it's very important to tell the salvage crowd to lift it up, do not pull it, because the wheels turn the gearbox like turning a clock the wrong way. Instead of driving the slow wheel driving the fast wheel driving the slow one, it's the other way. The slow one drives the fast one, and when the small one is driving the big one, it's grand. When you do it the other way, you put such pressure on the teeth of the gears, you break them. That's the way it is. So now, Ohashi also told the outlets that he tries to stop at old motels where he can stay on the first floor and run an extension cord out the window while he is on one of his road trips in his EV. So he makes sure if he gets into a motel over in America, they're everywhere. It's geared up for long distance driving, and they call them Best Westerns motels and all this. But Best Western is one I used to use quite a lot when I was over there. You just book in for the night. There's a cup of tea. You pay your bill and you stay the night. And a lot of the time the sheets might not be changed, and it depends on where you are. But you could actually find yourself having to roll into the bed that some other fella slept in the night before. Not in all cases, but it happened to me. In some cases, the motels have plug-ins for block heaters. Now, Irish European people may not understand this, but in America, it's so cold in the Midwest, especially Wyoming and up that Midwest, it's so cold in the winter that they have to plug in the engine block, to keep the heater warm, because you could burst the block if you hadn't antifreeze in it. And also it'll give starter problems unless the battery's in top condition. So you keep it gently heated, and that's included in the price of your hotel charge. It's very little. It's only enough to buy the kettle, let's say, just enough. So anyway, so he was putting the wire out the window. Unfortunately, those extra 40 miles obtained by charging overnight were only enough to get him to Rivertown, he said. So from there, he drove his electric vehicle to a Nissan dealership to charge for a few more hours, just to make sure he wouldn't get stranded. So how many people will be stranded? How many people are going to be stranded? And you can't tow them. Right. After that, Ohashi was able to make it to Rivertown, where he pulled off into Hampton Inn that offers EV charging. So it had one. He got charging there. A few hours after charging there, he headed up to Wind River Canyon. So I barely made it to Cody. So he had an outrageous struggle there. Now, we won't dwell on it, but he goes on to say that charging that way out the window would put a big drain on the power supply for the motel, and if they knew you were at it, they'd charge you extra for it, and they mightn't even allow it. I'm only just making the point. Enough said there. That's that man's experience on 15 minutes, and that's gives his name and all, and that's exactly what we're finding. If you buy an electric car, you need to be able to devote a big part of your time to organising and planning your trip. In a busy world, you haven't time. If you're super rich, you can go for a drive and have all planned and talk about it and show off. If you're just an ordinary person that needs the car to get to work and let someone off when you get there and all that stuff, you need to know where you're going. You can't be at this messing. Added to that, there's no guarantee there will be electricity in the grid. There mightn't be. So the other problem, if you live in an estate or in a close-knit houses together, the noise of a generator may render it a non-starter. Folks, that's the experience of that man, and that makes perfect sense. Don't forget, if you have the heater on, the lights on, the wipers on, and a radio, and you're in hilly terrain, which we have in most of Ireland and the UK for that matter, you'll get very little mileage. I can preach it all I like. What I want to do is to let people know, if you touch these in defiance of the very best advice and you get stuck on the road, well, that serves you right. I have no sympathy for people who now know the pitfalls, unless that there's unfortunate children involved, and there's nothing children hate as much as being stranded in a car with no heat, the poor little things. So I am sympathetic in that position. I believe these cars will be lying up dumped in a very short time. It's a novelty factor. It's a novelty factor. It's the very same as certain people used to put gas from chicken houses and things like that into their cars, and they brag about, I don't have to pay any tax, so the revenue, I don't have to pay the road tax. But after a while, those people got a bit older and they were driving the same as me, just sticking the fuel into the tank and paying for it. And all you'd be doing, there's no easier way. If you're carrying a big old tank of gas in the back, it's a cursed nuisance. It's difficult to fill. It's high pressure. It's all these problems. My father ran it on a coal gas cylinder during the oil strike in 1973, and it was for a bit of a laugh he did it. So the point about it is, you can do these things, but do you really want to? If you commit 60,000 to electric car, whether you pay for it on the never or with upfront, you want to know what you're getting. You want to know what you're getting. And a nice spin around and a nice sat nav and all these whirly gigs are no replacement for a reliable vehicle that will get you to and from where you're going. And to my notion, although the petrol cars are well liked in America, but to my notion, the modern small car diesel engine is so refined in the better makes that there is no equal to it and no more economical car. I just on the farm have a van, a Nissan, a Volkswagen Caddy, and it go on the smell of diesel. It takes very little. It won't go on none. And why would I want to change that, a winning formula? Why would I want to change it? You'd want to be mad in the head. And I repeat what I'm saying. The batteries are not lasting, and we're going to do a video on that in later, because I want to warn people. If you go into this, you go in with your eyes open, don't come running looking for sympathy. There'll be no sympathy. And I'll tell you one thing, the Green Party will give you no sympathy. And this lady got no sympathy from the charging station that told her, we might fix it someday during the week, or it might be next week. Sure, it'll be all right. That's what you're going to get if this happens, folks. Give me a thumbs up or a thumbs down, and we'll see you back for something else.